Good morning, everybody. Good to be worshiping with you this morning. Last week, Pastor Heather kicked off this new series that we're calling My Story, and it's this connection to the previous series we did, The Big Story. Now remember that God entered into a covenant with Abraham and Moses and really Israel. And then in the new covenant through Jesus, he enters into this covenant, into this promise with you. And so we're talking about how this story is your story. Last week, in presenting this, Pastor Heather brought us a message from Jesus that he loves you and he is with you. And this morning, I want to continue by saying that he's with you and you don't have to be afraid. Now, fear is a universal thing, right? Everyone experiences fear. Black, white, Asian, male, female, rich, poor, young, old. All of us have experiences of fear, even though not all of us experience it the same way or about the same things. So, for example, there are things that psychologists label as phobias. Now, phobia is a Greek word meaning fear. And there are some really wild phobias. There are thousands that they've identified. For example, did you know that pogonophobia is the fear of beards? Every child that ever comes around me has that fear, I'm sure. Scriptophobia is fear of handwriting in public. Xanthophobia is a fear of the color yellow, right? All of these fears, and most of them are sparked by, rooted in some kind of traumatic event that took place in a person's life. I developed a fear. I don't know if it is a phobia or not, but I developed a fear of walking in the dark. So a number of you know that I have this condition, retinitis pigmentosa, and so it's taking my vision away. And it starts with taking away night vision. And so as that part of the disease progressed and it became less and less comfortable for me to walk around in the dark, I got really stressed out anytime I knew I'd have to be going outside and walking around in the dark. But over time, I thought I'd kind of gotten a handle on that. Until a year ago, when I went to the Seeing Eye to get a guide dog, and they were describing the different things that we would be doing as part of our training, and one of them was going for a walk at night. And my anxiety went, like, oh, I guess I don't have a handle on that, right? Now, not all fears are phobias, and not all fears are bad, right? There are good fears. Merriam-Webster defines fear this way. Fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. All right, so that's fear. And it can be a good thing. If there's something lurking out there just beyond your ability to see, but you feel this fear, it prepares you physically to either defend yourself or to take off, right? Fight or flight. Now, for days, back to the Seeing Eye, I was anxious over this impending outside walk at night with Bodhi. And the fear was, I'm going to fall. I'm going to walk off a sidewalk that I don't see and I'm going to fall down, or I'm going to walk into a pole, or I'm going to get lost, or something like that. That's what fear does. At the heart of fear is a dread about the unknown and your lack of control over it. It's a fear of the unknown, a dread of the unknown, and your lack of ability to control it. King David, you know David, the giant slayer, David, the warrior king, David, the man after God's own heart. David experienced fear. And he wrote about it. I love the fact that he did this. So one example was something he wrote in Psalm 55. Listen to what David wrote. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove so I could fly away and be at rest. Right? David's experiencing fear. And it's an overwhelming kind of feeling of dread about the unknown that's out there and his inability to control it. And this courageous warrior wishes that he had dove's wings, right? So he could fly away. We want to run away from our fear. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that sense of fear that something out there is going to happen and it's kind of murky and dark and it makes you feel overwhelmed and a sense of dread, and all you really want to do is escape? Take this to heart this morning. If you have ever felt that, if you're feeling that today, I want you to take this to heart, that God is with you and you don't have to be afraid. This doesn't mean that you won't feel fear, right? That's a natural reaction to when things are out of control, right? When you feel overwhelmed, when there is something unknown out there and you don't have control over it. You're going to feel fear. You're going to experience it. But that doesn't mean that you have to live there. That's the difference. You can acknowledge that you're afraid, but you don't have to live there. You can move beyond it with God's help. Again, David talks about this in another one of his Psalms, one of probably the most well-known of David's Psalms, the 23rd Psalm. Remember what it says. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will what? Fear no evil. I will fear no evil. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, or as some translations put it, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, this dark place, this low place, that's the image that is being created in this dark valley. It's a place in life where you just feel low, where things are unclear. It's hard to see the future with any sense of hope. It's this dark, deep valley of life. This sense of dread that something bad, there's some evil out there. And how did David go through this? Well, the first thing that he says that we need to remember is that you walk through it. Even though I walk through the darkest valley. These dark places, these dreadful places, these places that cause fear in you are not places to pitch your tent and to live, right? These are places that you go through. You walk through them. And then David says, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. God is with you in the valley. David understood that he wasn't walking there alone. God was with him. One of the worst aspects of fear is the feeling that you're alone, right? That in that dark place, in that fearful place, you're there by yourself. And no one is with you. Nobody really understands. Nobody is there to support you. You feel isolated. And it just deepens the sense of dread and fear. So, when the time came for me to take my night walk with Bodhi, the trainer sensed my anxiety. Well, she didn't sense it. I told her, I'm scared. And she said something really helpful. She said, trust your dog, and I'll be right behind you. And so we set out on this walk, first through a residential area, and then across a busy street, and then into downtown Morristown, and that's the North Jersey, not Morristown, but Morristown. And on this strip, along this sidewalk that we're walking, were a series of restaurants and bars. There were cafe tables on the other side. There were signs out in the sidewalk, and I couldn't see any of it. And so I'm walking at first really tentative, with the dog. And behind me, the trainer saying, you're doing great, you're doing fine. And I began to sense the harness and feel his movements. And I'm just moving with this dog. And I could tell that we were going around things even though I couldn't see them. And I had the trainer behind me. Doing great. That was awesome. What a neat move. And about halfway into this walk, I began to relax. The fear began to melt away. And it became exhilarating, moving through the dark, being led and encouraged all the way. David dealt with fear, recognizing that even in the darkest valley, he didn't have to fear evil because God was with him. So David experienced fear, and so, friends, did Jesus. Just hours before Jesus' arrest, before he was to be crucified, Jesus had had a meal with his disciples, a Seder meal at the Passover. And after the meal was over, Jesus and his disciples went out for a walk in the dark, in the street. And this is how Matthew describes what happened next. It's Matthew chapter 26. This is what it says. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him. And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Jesus was afraid. He's expressing this fear to his friends. As you read on in the story, you wonder, why did he bring these guys with them? They were a complete waste. They were useless. right? He gave them one thing to do. Would you just sit here and pray? And when he came back, they were asleep. Not once, not twice, 3 times, right? Why did he even bother bringing these guys? He knew God was with him. And as I thought about that, I thought maybe he just wanted to know that his friends were with him too. Maybe even for Jesus, who was fully God and fully human, maybe fear is less overwhelming when you have others with you, even if they're not all that helpful. Right? Just having them present as you're walking through the dark valley. So Jesus goes off by himself, and this is what happened next. Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me." Jesus is acknowledging his fear. He's acknowledging that this thing that is out there is dreadful. And if it's all the same to you, God, I'd just as soon pass. Right? I'm with Jesus on this one. How about you? Right? When it comes to the dark valley, if it's all the same, I'd rather not walk through it. I'd like to do the bypass. Right? Here's the thing. Fear is a secondary emotion, right? We feel fear about something that's out there. It's expressed in a physical way. We feel it in our bodies, but it's about something else that's driving that feeling. A number of years ago, I got a call about a young woman. Family members called to let me know that she had been diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and she wasn't handling it all that well. She was angry. She was angry at the doctors. She was angry at her family. She was angry with her friends. She was angry with God. She was just angry. And they asked if I would go see her. And so I went to meet with her, and she was clearly angry, and I asked, "Why? Why are you so angry?" And she said, "I'm afraid." Of what? "I have cancer." And you can just tell she's thinking, who is this idiot that they sent to see me? I said, "I know you have cancer, but why are you afraid?" "It's terminal. I'm going to die." "Okay, well, tell me more about that." And she began to think about it, and she started to articulate, "I'm afraid for my family. I'm afraid for my kids, for my husband. I'm afraid for me. I don't know what happens to me." And as over time, we processed that together, and she processed it on her own with others, her fear began to lessen. She started praying for individuals in her life, her husband, her kids, her friends, her rest of her family, specifically for each of those people. And for herself. And this happened over a long period of time. This wasn't a short kind of thing. This took time for her to work through and process all of this. But the last time I met with her, there was no more anger. There was no fear. She was at peace. Peace with her family and peace with God. She knew that God was with her. So now listen to how Jesus ended his conversation with God. Each time that he prayed, 3 times. And each time his prayer ended with these words, "Yet not as I will, but as you will." Not as I will, but as you will. This is a prayer of surrender. It's giving over my will for God's will. It's a recognition that God's will and God's way are always best, even if we don't understand them. Even if we'd rather do it another way. We know that God's will and God's way are best, and we relinquish control to God. So I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up. They're going to lead us in another song. But I want to close with this. All of us experience fear. And I want you to know, as I know, that God is with you and you don't have to be afraid. I want to say to those of you who may be experiencing fear at a profound level, you're not able to sleep and you are having, kind of panic attacks and that kind of thing. If you're not already seeing a professional therapist to get help going through that, I want to encourage you to do that. They'll be tremendously helpful to you. I want to say then to all of us, don't deny your fears. It does us no good to deny our fears. We all have them. Bring friends around you. They may not be all the support that you want. They may not be able to solve it for you, but you want to make sure that you're not going through it alone. Don't be afraid to name your fear to God and to others. And remember this, that the God of the big story is the same God who's writing your story, one day, one step at a time.